into all the technology innovation that we're already seeing and a lot of folks in this room are involved in.
Thanks, Brett. Brian?
So good morning, Brian Wells. I work for Penn Medicine. It's the combination of the University of Pennsylvania Health System and the Perelman School of Medicine here in Philadelphia. And I'm very fortunate and lucky to work in a place that's invested in capturing electronic data about healthcare for years. I've got in a clinical data warehouse that my team has built now. We've got about 12 years data on 4.5 million patients going back quite a long time, hundreds of millions of orders and results in this data warehouse. And now we can use that warehouse to do some pretty amazing things with. And so while my focus in the past 5 years has been on building software and data warehouse on the clinical side, I've now shifted to doing the same thing on the School of Medicine side. And if you ever work in academia, you probably know that there's a lot of islands of data in academia. Generally, folks get a grant and they get permission to build a database. They get funding to go build a database, and they don't really think about it in an enterprise fashion. So I've got to go out and gather together all these islands of data in the School of Medicine, collaborate them, get them together, aggregate them up into one large integrated research data warehouse, and then connect that research data warehouse back to the clinical phenotype data in our health system warehouse to build this, in a sense, giant personalized medicine big data warehouse across our entire enterprise. So that's my big challenge. And we had a meeting yesterday talking about this effort to begin to gather up the genomic data. And I was talking to a whole team of researchers, and I said, well, can I take the 1,000 or 1,500 lung samples that you have and the sequence and the 50,000 SNPs you have in your DNA test that you did on these 1,500 lung samples, and put them in the warehouse? And then folks started raising questions about, what about consent? Do you have consent from the patients to put that data in the warehouse and do things with it they weren't consented to in the first place? And I, of course, assumed that we did and found out that we really don't. So one of the big things I'm kind of trying to figure out now at Penn is, what can we do with that data? And can we analyze it in a de-identified fashion? Does our consent allow us to do that? It could be that the consent is different in every study, and I got to go back into every study and figure out which patients were consented to do what. And as you might expect, that consent information is not stored in some nice electronic database. It's in a bunch of paper, in a file somewhere that has to be gone through and figured out. So we have to figure out at Penn to really do things with this data. What consent do we have? What can we do with it? How long does that consent last? And then how do we track that consent? And of course, patients can opt out of consent. And so you have to track the fact that this one sample didn't opt in to this consent. So you have to be able to track every piece of DNA, in a sense, and say whether you can or cannot use that individual record as part of a research and analytics or a study. So it's a whole new world of research for me and understanding for me about the challenges in the research space, how to get the data together, and then how to really use it. We think we can do wonderful things with it, but there's always, as you probably all know, and there's always that one last thing in healthcare, that workflow problem, that one thing no one thought of, that one provider that does it a little different way, that kind of stops some great concept from moving forward. So those are some of my near-term challenges, and I look forward to talking about more of it today.
Great. So I'm Catherine Tang. I have kind of two hats that I wear at work. One is as an internal medicine physician, so I see patients 50% of the time. So this is adult patients doing preventive care, doing chronic disease management, and